Today, we're taking a look at the Garden of Eden and seeing that it was actually a trap as we look at a book called The Testimony of Truth, which was one of the books banned by the church. Now, this is a book we started in a previous video, but if this is your first time seeing this, you don't have to see the previous video for it to make sense. You can watch this one standalone and it'll still be good. So last time we talked about how the Testimony of Truth was revealing that God is actually trapping souls here into the material realm, that bodies are actually prisons for the soul. That's where we left off last time. We talked about that a lot. Now we are continuing where we're going to look at the story of the Garden of Eden from that perspective. And this is really the serpent side of the story, from the whole, the idea of the serpent being able to get a say in all this. Now, the idea here is that, remember, in the Testimony of Truth, it's telling you that everything that you've heard about, Christianity and the God of what would become Orthodoxy, all that is wrong. That the material world is an illusion. God is actually an evil being, the devil, called Yaldabaoth, also known as the Demiurgos, or the creator. And this evil being is capturing souls and putting them into bodies as prisons to be his slaves and worshipers, demanding devotion, demanding faith, demanding everything from humanity, taking from the divine light and putting them in matter. So, from that perspective, we're going to take a look now at the story of the Garden of Eden. And basically what's being said here is the Garden of Eden is not what you think that it is. The Garden of Eden is actually a trap. It's a prison. And the reason why that is because when we talk about this creator God, so this creator God is essentially creating bodies and trapping sparks of the divine light into bodies to be its slave. Now, according to Gnosticism, that's what you and I are. We are all these divine sparks, part of the divine mind. So we're divine. We're divine sparks that have been trapped in matter. The Gnostics believe in reincarnation. So they believe that we are trapped in bodies, in matter, that we are imprisoned here. And so their whole idea is that the Creator God, what the Creator God did was he took these sparks of divine light and he had to imprison them because he knew if they knew what they were, that they would actually be more powerful than him. So basically, like if we knew what we are, if we realize that we're divine, we will become more powerful and would be able to escape this evil creator God's grasp. So he hatched a plan. And what he did was, if we take a look at the different Gnostic gospels, the Gnostic texts, usually specifically the Sethian Gnostics, what he did was first he imprisoned them in a body. And he made this body subject to forgetfulness. So made them forget what they are as well. And then in addition to that, he split them into male and female. And because they used to be one, they used to be a united being, and they split them into male and female. And the reason why he did this was another step to try and get them to forget what they are and not be able to remember. So remember, in Gnosticism, everything is a metaphor, an allegory. So the idea of splitting them into, say, Adam and Eve is separating Adam. Adam represents mind. Adam represents awareness. Whereas Eve represents what in Gnosticism is called epinoia, or purposeful thinking, or intuition. What this aspect is, it's the aspect of mind that allows one to reflect internally and know what you are. You can think of it kind of like self-awareness. It's the ability to look within and realize what you are. It's that aspect of mind that allows for self-reflection. So this evil God split them into Adam and Eve, Adam representing mind, and Eve representing epinoia, being the ability to self-reflect. And so there's a lot to say about this, okay? I want to get to this because there's so much to talk about. So let's just start reading, and I'll explain all this as we go along because there's a lot, so much here, and it's so interesting to be able to see this interpretation of the Garden of Eden as a trap. So let's just jump right into this. Once again, this is the Testimony of Truth. And it says right here, "It is written in the law concerning this, when God gave a command to Adam, from every tree you may eat, but from the tree which is in the midst of paradise do not eat. for on the day that you eat from it, you will surely die. But the serpent was wiser than all the animals that were in paradise and persuaded Eve, saying, on the day when you eat from the tree which is in the midst of paradise, the eyes of your mind will be opened. And Eve obeyed, and she stretched forth her hand. She took from the tree and ate. She also gave to her husband with her. And immediately they knew they were naked, and they took some fig leaves and put them on as girdles. Now here's what all this means. So in the traditional story of Adam and Eve, God creates the garden. He puts two trees in the garden, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And he says you can eat from every tree in the garden except for the tree of knowledge and good and evil. And the rest, the serpent came up and said, hey, no, you're not going to die if you eat from this tree. You should eat from it because then your eyes will be opened and you'll be as God. And so what the testimony of truth is saying is it's going to say, hey, really, really take a look at this and see what kind of God makes knowledge off limits? What kind of God makes knowledge forbidden? And we just talked about epinoia. And the tree of life the tree of knowledge, eating from the tree of knowledge represents epinoia as well. And you know how I said that epinoia is also related to Eve? Well, you can see that Eve is the one who takes from the tree of knowledge, eats, and gives it to Adam. So you can see Eve again being associated with epinoia. And Gnosticism is really great in this aspect because it has so many powerful feminine figures and praises the feminine, whereas mainstream Christianity demonizes the feminine, saying like, oh, it was woman that ate from the tree, so they are the ones who brought sin into the world, and that's why they're not allowed to teach, why they're lesser than men, why they have to be quiet in church, but they can save themselves through childbirth. Really bad stuff, really crazy stuff. There's a ton of sexist things. And that comes from the New Testament, by the way, because a lot of people will say, oh, no, that's the Old Testament. No, that's the New Testament that says that. So very sexist. Whereas in Gnosticism, you have the reverse, which is women are praised for having this ability and being able to give it to Adam rather than being demonized for it. And so you can see again Eve being associated with the tree of knowledge, which is this idea of epinoia or purposeful thinking, which is again you can think of it for ease of understanding like self-awareness. It's the ability to have self-awareness. And it's in the I want to say the other Gnostic text called the Hypostasis of the Archons, or the Reality of the Rulers, which I have a whole playlist on, by the way. So go check that out if you want to know all about that. It's really great. If I'm remembering correctly, the serpent in the Reality of the Rulers is actually associated with Eve's, kind of like Eve's higher self. It's kind of like Eve's divine aspect manifests as the serpent that gets them to eat. And that's super cool. I love that. So you have this idea of eating from the tree. And so what's the whole deal about, right? It says immediately they knew they were naked and they took fig leaves and put them on as girdles. What does that mean? It probably seems odd, maybe, to some of you out there. What this means, remember, everything is metaphorical, all of this stuff. But what this specifically means is that, well, think about it. When you eat from and become self-aware, well, one would realize you were naked. If animals don't realize they're naked, animals don't need to go cover themselves up. That's because animals don't have self-awareness in the way that we do. Animals are sentient, they experience and they have emotions and they have feelings, but they're not self-aware in the way that we are, with some exceptions. But in the way that we are, they are not. So they don't go, oh shit, I'm naked, I need to put some clothes on. So this is representative of realizing that one is naked is going into a higher awareness, self-awareness. And this is all, again, all these traps are being laid by God, the creator of the world. First, God takes divine light, traps it in a body, and makes it forget what it is. Then he splits it in two, separating mind from self-awareness. Then he puts it in a tree and makes it forbidden. But you can see how this evil entity is being thwarted again and again and again. Now, what's really interesting is, if you remember, there are two trees, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And you can eat from all the trees except for the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So the Gnostics interpreted the tree of life as really being more like the tree of death. They didn't call it that, but very close to it, because what they called it was like it was the false life. It was the life of the flesh. That it would give rise to not like divine intuition and intellect, but rather it would give rise to fleshly things, and that it would tie one to the material world. So they looked at the tree of life as being the tree of life in matter, which continues to shackle humanity to the material world. Remember that they looked at as procreation as being evil, because they thought if you had children, you were just making more bodies to be prisons in the world. So they really looked down on things like sex. And so they looked at the tree of life as being associated with like passion and lust and greed and vanity and all that. Now they got that wrong. There's nothing wrong with having kids, and there's nothing wrong with having sex. These are fantastic things in life that you can partake in if you want, as long as they're safe and consensual and all that. So if we take a look at the secret book of John, though, I want to show you something that's really interesting, and I love this. So the secret book of John is another Gnostic text, and it's one of the longest ones. So again, I did playlists on the secret book of John. Check it out. Check out my playlist on the secret book of John if this stuff interests you, because it gets into all these stories in a ton of detail. But I love this quote from the secret book of John, where they talk about the so-called tree of their life. See? So it says, Adam and and I'm just going to read to you real quick. This is really short, but I love this. I love this. This is one of my favorite Gnostic writings here. So it says this is where Adam and Yaldabaoth's paradise, and that's what they called God, the creator of this world, as Yaldabaoth, or Samael, the blind god, or Nibro, the rebel, or the Demiurgos, the creator. So the rulers took the man and placed him into paradise, and they told him to eat freely. And the rulers are the archons, whereas Yaldabaoth is the chief archon. So you can think of it like the devil and his demons, sort of. And it says here, and I love this, their food is bitter, their beauty is corrupt, their food is deceit, and their trees are ungodliness. Their fruit is poison, and their promise is death. So do you see this complete different interpretation of the Garden of Eden from the Gnostic's perspective? The poisonous fruit, their promise is death, their trees are ungodliness. It's really this really dark, you can think of it, as it being portrayed as this bright and beautiful place where everything is fantastic and wonderful, but it's really all a trap to get people to keep them in a low state of consciousness, not know what they are, and to be in this state of just complete and total ignorance. Meanwhile, they're in this trap. And it continues, they placed the tree of their life. You see the difference? Not the tree of life, the tree of their life. And the archons and the demiurgos are associated with matter and the material. So the material, the carnal life, the life of decaying matter, which they looked at as matter as being very, very evil. Now, we don't look at it like that. We look at matter as being just our canvas or our clay to create what we will. But they looked at matter as being very evil. So they placed the tree of their life into the middle of paradise. And it says, I will teach you the secret of their life, the plan they made together about an artificial spirit. So this is what they call the artificial spirit, which is, if you think about the spirit as being the intellect, things like intuition, reason, thinking, wisdom, they think of the artificial spirit as sort of being like lust and passion and things associated with like greed and desire, vanity, ignorance, sort of dark reflections. And remember, that's what the Gnostics thought. There's nothing wrong with taking pride in how you look and freedom of sexual expression, all that. That's not my view. That's not our view. But that's how the Gnostics looked at it. And So I will teach you the secret of their life, the plan they made together about an artificial spirit. Its root is bitter, its branches are dead, its shadow is hatred, its leaves are deception. The nectar of wickedness is in its blossoms. Its fruit is death, its seed is desire. It flowers in the darkness. Those who eat from it are denizens of Hades. Darkness is their resting place. And so you see how that's how the Gnostics viewed the tree of life and the Garden of Eden. Whereas in mainstream Christianity, the tree of life is great and good, and Garden of Eden is fantastic. No, they looked at it as a shadowy, dark place. And then as for the tree called the knowledge of good and evil, it is the epinoia of the light. They commanded him not to eat from it, standing in front to conceal it, for fear that he might look upwards to the fullness and know the nakedness of his indecency. Basically, to realize that look upwards to the fullness means the fullness was the pleroma, the realm of divine light, mind. So to look up at the pure divine realm and realize its nakedness, realize, oh, I'm in a material body. This is not what I truly am. So they wanted to hide this from them, because remember, the creator God, the Demiurgos Yaldabaoth, knew that if humanity realized what they were, they would be more powerful than him. Because all of us are divine. We are God. The Demiurgos is the blind God, Samael, the blind God, because it thinks it's the real God, but it's not. There's a higher God, which is us, which is what we are, but he has tried to break us apart and trap us into matter. This would make a fantastic movie, by the way, don't you think? I think it would be a really, really cool movie. You could have Yaldabaoth as sort of like a Lovecraftian horror or something. And someone needs to do this. It'd be great. Why has no one done this yet? Someone should do this. Anyway, but that was from the Secret Book of John. Let's get back to the Testimony of Truth. As a reminder, the Secret Book of John, I have a whole playlist on my channel. Go check it out if you want to know about that. It's great. So in the Testimony of Truth, we are continuing here, where God has, told them that you can't eat from this tree. So the Testimony of Truth continues. But God came at the time of evening, walking in the midst of paradise. When Adam said, hold on. So God came at night, walking in the garden. When Adam saw him, he hid himself, and God said, Adam, where are you? He answered and said, I have come under the fig tree. And at that very moment, God knew that he had eaten from the tree of which he had commanded him not to eat from it. And he said to him, who is it that has instructed you? And Adam answered, the woman whom you have given me. And the woman said, it is the serpent who instructed me. And God cursed the serpent and called him devil. And he said, behold, Adam has become like one of us, knowing evil and good. Then he said, let us cast him out of paradise, lest he take from the tree of life and eat and live forever. So far, it's just sort of giving you a recap of the story that you're familiar with in the Bible. It's giving a recap of the typical Garden of Eden story. But it's very interesting, right, to notice that even in the original story, it says, now he has become like us, plural. So there's a lot of plurality in the Old Testament when referring to God. And this is because Christianity, which was originally based on Judaism, was not always a monotheistic religion. It was a polytheistic religion, or at least a henotheistic religion. I did a whole video on that as well. I think called Is God Actually a War God? Or God is Actually a War God, where you can hear about that. But so there's just a lot of information in each of these things, and I wish I had the time to go into each and every one, but we have to, stick to the main topic. But it is interesting. If you don't know this, it says, and God cursed the serpent and called him devil. And so for those who don't know, I grew up in a strict Christian household. I used to be a Christian, I have RTS, or religious trauma syndrome, stemming from that. It's a whole thing. But anyway, I was taught this. And so what a lot of Christians believe, and what we believed, and it's crazy, was that snakes used to have legs. Because God cursed the serpent and said, oh, from now on you have to crawl on your belly for the rest of your days. So, according to that logic, snakes used to have legs. And if you think that's wild, get this. So there is this creationist known as Kent Hovind, and he's a creationist, and he believes that the earth is only 6,000 years old, and that, he takes the Bible literally. And he tries to teach this and prove it in a scientific way, kind of like how flat earthers trying to prove the earth is flat in a scientific way. He tries to prove that the earth is only 6,000 years old and that God created everything, blah, blah, blah. He's a young earth creationist, but he's very popular in the Christian community. And it's like we would basically watch Kent Hovind instead of theories of evolution and science and whatnot. But he, get this. What he teaches is that in the Garden of Eden, everything was supposed to be perfect, right? Everything was supposed to be perfect in the Garden of Eden. So it's like, well, what about snakes that are poison, that inject venom, that are venomous? What about venomous snakes? Well, I mean, because the thing is, well, wouldn't the Garden of Eden not be perfect if there's venomous snakes in it? So Kent Hovind's idea was, well, before Adam and Eve ate from the tree, it's such a weird thing. It's like snakes would inject vaccines. It's so wild stuff. It's this idea, well, instead of in the Garden of Eden, snakes weren't venomous. They didn't inject venom when they bit people. It's like it was vaccines or something like that. Really crazy stuff. Anyway, I'm getting a little off topic here. The testimony of truth has now outlaid the story as you are familiar with it, as we are familiar with it. But now it's going to reevaluate it and basically go, hey, wake up. Doesn't this story seem a little suspicious to you? That's what the testimony of truth is saying. Hey, why are you believing in this story and thinking that this God is a good being when clearly this is an evil God and the Garden of Eden is a trap? And it says, but what sort of God is this? And you can see it's basically, this is what the testimony of truth is trying to wake the reader up and go, hey, this is not God. What kind of God does this? What sort of God is this? First, he maliciously refused Adam from eating of the tree of knowledge. So first of all, he makes knowledge forbidden. What kind of God does that? Second, he said, Adam, where are you? And it says, God does not have foreknowledge? Would he not know from the beginning? So it's saying, again, hey, think about this story. God is asking, can't find Adam, and is asking, hey, Adam, where are you? Saying, don't you think God would have known where Adam is? Isn't God supposed to know everything? Isn't God supposed to be omniscient? Isn't God supposed to be have foreknowledge? Wouldn't he know from the very beginning? So it's trying to say, hey, wake up. This is not God. This is a being that's denying knowledge and is not all-knowing. And it continues, and afterwards he said, being God, let us cast him out of this place, lest he eat of the tree of life and live forever. And it continues, surely he's shown himself to be a malicious grudger. And what kind of God is this? So it's saying, hey, God is a malicious grudger. Adam and Eve basically did one thing wrong. And hey, isn't God supposed to be forgiving? But no, instead, God holds a grudge, casts them out of the garden forever. And this testimony of truth is just saying again and again and again, look at all the facts. Clearly, this is not God. And the whole point of the testimony of truth is trying to tell people, look, don't just take these stories at face value and believe in them and interpret them the way that everyone does. They're saying, examine it critically. Obviously, this God is not a true God. And in our previous reading of the testimony of truth, we saw where it was saying very similar something about the virgin birth of Christ. They're saying, hey, instead of just taking the virgin birth as being literal, try and figure out what that means. Look at it metaphorically. Because that's what a lot of people don't get about Gnosticism. And I say this a lot, but I really want to nail that in here because a lot of people look this over in Gnosticism. 2 points, okay? The first point is that Gnosticism is metaphorical. Gnosticism is saying, hey, all these stories are not literally true. Look at the metaphor behind them. And we saw that clearly in the last time we read the Testimony of Truth, where they said something along the lines of that the Jordan River represents sexual passion or something like that. So, Jesus being baptized in the Jordan River represents him overcoming sexual passion, something along those lines. So clearly things are metaphorical. And so, and also the second thing that a lot of people don't understand about Gnosticism is that they go, oh, well, the Gnostic books were written hundreds of years after Jesus' time, so they can't be accurate. Well, the thing about the Gnostics is the Gnostics don't care if they're accurate because these stories didn't happen. So that's the big difference between Christianity and Gnostic Christianity. Mainstream Christianity takes the stories as being literally true. These certain people existed and they did these certain things. Gnosticism does not. Gnosticism says these stories are metaphors. And so, for example, when we talk about the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, check out my playlist on that. I have lots of playlists. The idea, say, in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene isn't so much that, oh, there really was a person named Mary who specifically did these things. The point of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is written in a metaphorical way to say that the feminine perspective is powerful and important and must be integrated into existence. And that's why the Gnostics don't care about having a consistent narrative. Because in some of the Gnostic texts, it's Eve's higher self that is the serpent. And in other Gnostic texts, it's Christ that's the one who told Adam and Eve to eat from the tree. And I think he even took the form of a bird and not the form of a snake. But you see, it's because they're not trying to, well, which one really happened? Was it Eve or was it the serpent or was it a bird? The Gnostics don't give a fuck because they're saying it's the message behind it that's important. Don't get so caught up in these stories. It's the idea behind it that's important. And so it's always important to remember that when reading Gnosticism. And when people go, oh, well, it's not credible because it was a couple hundred years written after Jesus' death, so we don't know if this stuff really happened, or we don't. The Gnostics don't care about this stuff. So even in the Gospel of Judas, when they're talking about the 12 disciples aren't actually the 12 disciples. The 12 disciples represent what would become the Christian Orthodoxy. And it was a criticism on Christian Orthodoxy at the time. So most of the Gnostic texts are written in metaphorical ways to criticize mainstream Christianity. They're not trying to be taken as being literally true because they're saying it's all metaphorical in the first place. Now, I'm sure there were some Gnostics who did believe it was literally true. Probably some of them did. But the ones who were, really truly understanding of what was going on knew that basically it was Platonism wrapped around a Christian narrative. And the Gnostics would try different ways to get people, because what the Gnostics were trying to do, they were trying to get people away from Christianity, this system that was making people worship a god in the sky instead of their own power, who were, praising martyrdom, so people were dying when they didn't have to. All these terrible things that religion does to people, keeps them in bondage, tells them they're dirty, sinful, and flawed. They were trying to get people to realize, no, you're divine. It's intelligence and thinking and mind and intuition that's important. And it's not all about the masculine. The feminine perspective is extremely important and must be there. And in Gnosticism is often leading the way, such as, Eve having Adam eat from the tree and all that. So Gnostics would try different ways to get people to, I just did a video on Marcellina and the Marcellians, who basically set up a sect in Rome and were trying to convert people to their version of Christianity, which was all about self-empowerment, social egalitarianism, equality, and all that. And you have different versions of Gnosticism, like the Valentinians. And the Valentinian Gnostics basically went, well, you know what? Christians aren't really liking the idea of God being evil, and they don't really like all the feminine aspects. So we're going to downplay the feminine aspects, and we're going to say that God isn't evil, but God was a lesser God. So God still is flawed, but he's not. So they were trying to create different versions to get people to understand truths about reality, and they were trying to do so by wrapping them up in different stories and narratives. Now, whether that was the right thing to do or not, I'm not necessarily saying it was or wasn't. I'm just and the fact that one had to do certain, like the Valentinians downplaying the feminine and all that really sucks. That's gross, but that's what they were trying to do as like a strategy. But my point being is that the way what Gnostics did, the way they wrote and what they were doing is completely different. It's 180, totally different from how Christianity works. So when people have that criticism of Gnosticism was, oh, well, we don't really know if these things happened, doesn't matter. They did. None of this stuff happened, okay? God, Jesus didn't walk on water and raised from the dead, and all these things are stories that are meant to be taken metaphorically. There's even a verse in the Bible that says that. It says, I speak in parables, and those who hear what I say don't... I forget what it says. I will... Actually, I might have it on my phone. Let me see. I just actually made a note to myself, so I'll read it. Yeah, here we go. Jesus said, and this is the Bible. This is Isaiah 6:9, or yeah, somewhere around there. Jesus said, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear. The knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of God has been given to you, but to others I speak in parables," stories, "so that though seeing, they don't see, through hearing, they don't understand." So basically, what does that mean? Well, when you tell someone a story that's a metaphor, but they don't understand the metaphor, they can hear the story but not understand it. Because if you take the story as being literal, not a metaphor, you're not really getting what it is. So that's, and that's a quote from actually in the Bible in Isaiah. So no one was multiplying loaves and bread and fish and walking on water and raising people from the dead. None of that shit happened. These are stories and metaphors, and the Gnostics were going, hey, what's important is using your mind, realizing your own power, and stepping into your power, and using intellect, and being your own savior, right? That was, remember, what this is called the testimony of truth, and it's summed up in one line. This, therefore, is the testimony of truth. When man comes to know himself and God, he will be saved, and he will crown himself with the crown unfading. So that's what the testimony of truth is about. Know yourself, and you will save yourself, and you will be crowned with the crown unfading. It's not someone that you have to be subservient to or a slave to. So the testimony of truth is going again and again. Why are you worshiping this, this monster who's obviously not God? What sort of God is this? He refused maliciously Adam from eating of the tree of knowledge. He didn't know where Adam was, so he doesn't have foreknowledge, and he cast them out forever, being a malicious grudger. What kind of God does all these things? And then it says, "For great is the blindness of those who read, and they did not know him." And that's exactly what we've been talking about. Great is the blindness of those who read, but they did not know him. Meaning, great is the blindness of the people who read this story and don't realize that this being represents something evil, not good. So basically what would become Christian Orthodoxy, they're saying that those people are blind because they are saying that those people read this story and don't realize that this is a representative of something evil, not something good. And to give more proof, the testimony of truth is saying, want more proof? God said, "I am a jealous God. I will bring the sins of the fathers upon the children until 3 and 4 generations." And think about how shitty this is. And this is all in the Bible. God says, "I'm a jealous God, and I will bring the sins of the fathers upon the children until 3 and 4 generations." Meaning if the father fucked up, who is God going to punish? Their children and their children's children and their children's children until 3 and 4 generations. Is that fair? First of all, should God be a jealous God? And is it fair that God is punishing these kids and their kids and their kids and their kids for something their great-great-great-great-great-grandfather did? And that's all summed up in the story of Garden of Eden. The whole point of Christianity says eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil was the original sin. So basically, all the suffering in the world, all the shittiness going on in the world right now is God punishing us, or the repercussions of Adam and Eve eating from the tree. And oh, well, it was actually Eve first, so women suck. is basically the narrative of Christianity. And the Gnostics are going, hey, don't you think that's kind of fucked up? Shouldn't actually we be praising women for the power of knowledge? And don't you think that that seems a little fishy for this being to be doing all these terrible things to the world because someone wanted to have knowledge? So, and it continues, God said, I will make their heart thick, and I will cause their mind to become blind, that they might not know nor comprehend the things that are said. So God's going to intentionally confuse people, intentionally fuck with them. And then it continues, but these things he has said to those who believe in him and serve him. And that's what they're saying. They're saying all this stuff that I just described, God is saying that to the people who worship him and serve him. It's not even his enemies. All these terrible things that were just described, that is what God does to those who follow him. And the point is, but what sort of God is this? Those who read this story and can't figure that out are blind. The testimony of truth says what is true for people to know themselves, be their own savior, and crown themselves with the crown unfading. And that's where we're going to stop tonight, but we're probably going to continue and do more of this next week, but there are so many more. Check out my playlists. I have a whole playlist on this, The Secret Book of John. Check them out. And hey, if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do. It tells the algorithm to spread this information around. There's a lot of people who don't want this information to get out there, so help us spread this information to the masses. Hit like, hit subscribe, it helps. Also, if you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon if you ever felt like you've learned something or gotten something from my work. It really helps. And shout out to my Patreon supporters and everyone who supports, because I'm actually going to be able to get a new camera, so expect better video quality very soon because of the support on Patreon. You get access to our weekly secret live streams. Our next secret live stream is going to be on Does Consciousness Create Reality? Our hidden Discord server, The Citadel, a lot more. Big shout out to everyone who does support, especially Philanthropist, Zach, Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Michael, Angela, Maria, Top of the World, Athan, DB, Joel, everyone else. If you'd like to support, the link will pop up right over here. And you can also hit the join button on YouTube to support my work. That helps out a lot as well. Thank you very much, my friends.